I call Colum Eastwood.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Given what Mr McCartney said, I'm kind of reluctant to get too combative because it is important that we speak with one voice in terms of Magee. In fact, we've been speaking with one voice in terms of the University for Derry campaign since 1964, when Unionist and Nationalist leaders came up here to protest what was a very unjust decision. And it is important to put it in that context because the people of Derry have been living with that decision since then. And I think the people of Derry understand very clearly the importance of education and the link that has to developing an economy. I think what we've done this year in Derry has been a tremendous effort to prove that we're not going to allow our past to determine our future. I stood and watched the largest Loyalist march in Northern Ireland go through the city centre of Derry with no problems whatsoever. The very next day we had the All-Ireland flag, and the greatest celebration of Irish culture in the world. So I think Derry knows well what its job is and its responsibility is to deliver on the economy. But it is very, very difficult for all us whingers, as the Enterprise Minister would have us called, to deliver on those promises when the fundamentals aren't right. The road system isn't right. The higher education system clearly isn't right. I remember the day that the One Plan was launched, because I happened to be the Mayor, and I spoke alongside, I think, the First and Deputy First Minister. And the figure of 9,400 was the kind of headline figure by 2020. I just want to make it clear, though, 9,400 was our compromise, because we recognise, and Mr McCartney has given the figures, we recognise that comparable cities of a comparable size need a much greater number than even 9,400 full-time students. But we take that as starters. But Mr Ramsey is right. The One Plan did have that commitment in it. But the very unfortunate thing was that was never really followed up in the programme for government. The programme for government, and I raised it at the time, used the word, "We will develop the One Plan." There was no specific target, no specific commitment to what I would say is the most important part of the One Plan, was the Magee expansion, and there was no specific commitment in a number of other areas as well. I think that's been one of the major failings of the last period. And we were not the party who changed the speaking with one voice thing. We didn't put up posters saying that Magee was guaranteed. And I think if you do that, you have to be prepared to deliver it and help deliver it. And we will engage and commit to any process that brings people together to try and deliver on that promise. But we won't let the executive away in the smoke either, because the University of Ulster has a commitment, the Minister has a commitment, but I think what we really need to see is the whole executive saying, this is our commitment now. We want to see 9,400 students in Magee, and this is how you do it. And I think everybody would come up to the mark in that regard. So that's the spirit in which we approach this. We'll engage in any process to try and help deliver it. And I'm happy to see and support economic plans and economic cases being made. I think the economic case is as clear as day for anybody to see that an expanded university with the right courses at Magee would make a massive difference to the economy of Derry, of Donegal, of Tyrone, and all the surrounding areas. So, we'll support anything that will help make this easier, but it has to be pointed out that the case has already been made, and it's been made repeatedly, and repeatedly. The difficult thing for us to see the University of Ulster committing to a £200 million project in Belfast, and we don't begrudge Belfast a £200 million university project, but people in Derry are seeing that and not seeing the equivalent or anywhere near the equivalent of a commitment to our city. But we're here to be positive, to be supportive. We hope that the Minister will get the support from around his executive table and his executive colleagues to deliver upon this, but we need a political will coming from every single part of this Assembly and this executive to make this happen, because if we don't deliver it, in 50 years' time, people are never going to thank us, because it was 50 years ago that this mistake was made and it still hasn't been corrected.
I now call